Right, let's now put the final sword into the fraud that's been perpetrated by the ABC's Media Watch show. We've talked about it before. Let's end this ABC's ludicrous claim that one of Australia's most committed global warming scientists didn't really mean exactly what he said when he gave a lecture at Sydney University. He said, no, global warming does not cause droughts.
This may not be what you expect to hear, but as far as the climate scientists know, there is no link between climate change and drought. Now, that may not be what you read in the newspapers and sometimes hear commented, but there is no reason a priori why climate change should make the landscape more arid.
Now, Media Watch, like every one of the ABC's main current affairs shows, presented by someone of the left, in this case Paul Barry, a real global warming alarmist. So he last week tried to undo the damage that Pittman had done to his cause. He claimed Pittman didn't really mean exactly what you just heard him say.
The professor had left out a crucial word.
And he fully admits he should have said there is no direct link between climate change and drought.
Yes, no direct link, but there's still a link, says Pittman, telling Media Watch.
Do hotter temperatures lead directly to higher evaporation and a higher risk of drought? No. But does global warming lead to changes in rainfall patterns that can lead to drought? Yes. This indirect link is clear.
So global warming doesn't cause drought, says the professor, but suddenly he says, well, it does, perhaps in another way that I forgot to mention. Causes drought in some places, but not in others. And, well, look, it's all very shoddy stuff. But for the ABC, Pittman's obvious backside covering was persuasive. Except I now have a PowerPoint slide that Pittman made for, guess what, a lecture on drought, which actually proves he was right the first time. In it, Pittman says Australia's probably by default in a drought, almost like a permanent drought that's broken now and then by major rainfall events. And current science, he says, global warming science, cannot tell us of the sign of the change in future drought. And Pittman then lists what droughts depend on. He says changes in rainfall and carbon dioxide and water use efficiency. He lists there at the bottom evaporative demand, vegetation responses. Have a look. Not once does he list changing weather patterns caused by man-made warming. Not once is that cited as even an indirect influence. Joining me is the federal politician who studied global warming more than any other person in Parliament, Liberal Craig Kelly. Craig, it's wonderful to see you again. What does this tell you about the way the ABC reports on global warming?
Well, Andrew, what actually Professor Pittman said there that was, I thought, most interesting was he said, this may not be what you expect to hear. He said, this may not be what you read in the newspapers and hear commented on. Now, what he's actually saying there is that the public perception about the links between drought and climate change, which he says doesn't exist, he says is actually wrong. Now, why is that? Why is that? That's because you've got the ABC with the $1 billion of taxpayers' money actually out there not telling the whole truth about this. And Professor Pittman is saying the public has been misled. And the ABC, that's their job, to inform the public, to tell us the truth and the whole truth. And then you've got the Media Watch program that's meant to correct any mistakes that the ABC make, and they're only actually making the myth-making even worse.
Look, just to underline that very important point that you've just made, I want to replay just one bit of what Pittman first said at that Sydney University lecture. That is, as far as the climate scientists know, no link between climate change and drought. Now, here he is.
As far as the climate scientists know, there is no link between climate change and drought. Now, that may not be what you read in the newspapers.
As you say, now that may not be what you read in the newspapers. Here is a climate scientist saying newspapers keep reporting something that is not true. Global warming causes drought. And the thing for me is, Craig, the ABC's Media Watch has been going for 26 years. As far as I can tell, not once in that 26 years has it corrected a newspaper for falsely claiming what Pittman, a global warming scientist, says is a common error. Global warming causes drought. Why would that be?
Well, Andrew, I've seen ABC programs one after the other just giving completely false and contradictory information, actually denying what is in the peer-reviewed science as far as the lack of connection between drought and climate change. Now, you'd think the ABC or Meteor Watch would get those charts from the Bureau of Meteorology, the rainfall charts, going back over 100 years, and look at them and analyse them and put the chart up for the Murray-Darling Basin, and you'd see, as Professor Pittman said, there is no trend over 100 years. It's a land of drought and flooding rains. The same thing in Queensland, South Australia, Victoria, Southern Australia, Eastern Australia. Whichever one of those rainfall charts that you grab, there is simply no drying trend, unless, of course, you cherry-pick 20 years here or there. But if you look at all the data, which you should, it shows no drying trend. Now, that is what you expect. If Meteor Watch were doing their job, that's what they would be showing on their program. So we wouldn't have an Australian public misled. Meteor Watch are simply not doing their job, and they are paid by the taxpayers for it.
In my opinion, and it is only my opinion, Meteor Watch, under Paul Barry, taxpayer funded, has stopped doing what its charter is as Meteor Watch, picking up journalistic errors, and has been hijacked to now hide facts about global warming to persecute or prosecute a global warming agenda. I think it's an absolute betrayal of journalism, what's happening there, and a betrayal of its duty to taxpayers. Now, talking about not being given the facts that might challenge the global warming scare, the Bureau of Meteorology, now, that too is a pretty warmest outfit, as we saw with the release of the emails in that big scandal, Hide the Decline scandal, University of East Anglia. The Bureau of Meteorology used to have on its website this graphic showing the average number of very hot days over the past century. Now, it's sort of a very rough measure of heat waves. We're often told that we're getting many more heat waves because of global warming, but as this graphic shows, there's only the very slightest increase in very hot days over the century, very slight. Why is this graphic, though, no longer on the Bureau's website?
Well, firstly, Andrew, that graphic actually shows that the year 1952 had the greatest number of very hot days going back to 1910. So this is actually contrary to the global warming theory that we hear. It also showed a linear trend of it was 0.08 increases in number of very hot days over a decade. So over a century, if you take that trend extended out for 100 years, you would have 0.8 of a day, not even one day, over being a very hot day, which is over 40 degrees. Now, for some reason, that chart, which is a bit of an inconvenient fact for the global warming alarmists, that used to be on the Bureau's website, and I've had a look on the Wayback Machine, the Google Internet Wayback Machine. It was there in March this year before the election, and somehow or other it's disappeared down a memory hole. It's no longer there.
Now, the One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts asked the Bureau about this yesterday. They say they're not sexing up the evidence or hiding the decline. Do you trust the Bureau of Meteorology?
Well, look, I've got some great concerns about the accuracy of their data. Firstly, if you look at the comparisons of the satellite temperature measurements and the ground temperature measurements from the Bureau of Meteorology, the Bureau's data runs a lot hotter. If you look at some of the changes that they've made, they've gone from a large Stevenson screen to a small Stevenson screen. When all the peer-reviewed science says that small Stevenson screen will run hotter, they've gone to these automatic probes taking 1 second readings, which are more likely to give you more hot records. And also, Andrew, we had meetings with the Bureau down here several years ago, and they'd adjusted, they'd homogenised the record, and they said, look, we've homogenised it, we've made it a bit warmer, we've cooled the past, made it warmer, but look, we've got it 100% right. We know what we were doing, there were all these reasons. Anyhow, earlier this year, we've heard they've had another go, and they've homogenised the homogenised data, and guess what? They've increased the temperature, they've shown an increase in temperature of another 23%. So remember, we're spending billions of dollars trying to reduce the temperature of a fraction of a degree, and the Bureau's showing us bigger variations in the way they homogenise the data.
Craig, it really is time for an audit on what's going on, and an audit not with hand-picked, warmers on there, people on both sides of the debate so that we can actually get some confidence in the data that is used to alarm us that the world's going to end in a great ball of fire. Craig Kelly, thank you so much indeed for your time.